All right, good afternoon to you once again. You're welcome. This is Good Afternoon Ghana, and we're going to explore some of the issues coming up within the country. We want to interact with the NGOs, association of a number of NGOs that are raising concerns about the Achimota forest. It has been a back and forth. At least one of them have gone to CHRAJ or petitioned CHRAJ to look into the issues that are coming up. Minority group in Parliament have also spoken, and they're saying that whatever investigation you want to conduct, want to make it public and let everybody hear what's going to go on at this, investigation. Meanwhile, the Lands and Forestry Ministry is also indicating, Natural Resources Ministry is also indicating that it is going to set up a committee for inquiry. It was supposed to have happened today, but that didn't happen. It has been postponed. We're following through with the ministry as and when they're ready to give us the updates. We will come through with the details of that one as well. Meanwhile, the ministry's releases that actually captures both the former Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Yusuf Hussaini, and former President John Dramani Mahama have also pushed the office of the former minister to also release a statement debunking some of the facts that have been raised in the statements as published by the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. That means it's giving a picture of a back and forth between the current administration and previous administration. But is that how this situation or this problem is going to be tackled? Maybe until the inquiry is set up, we won't know or won't get nowhere with it. You're welcome. We're just receiving information that the finance minister is about addressing the nation on some economic issues. So there will be a bit of some tweaks on this program this afternoon. We'll cross over when he's ready to address us. We'll pick the feed and give you for you to also have a first-hand information of what Ken Oforiatta will be telling us this afternoon. My name is Annie Efua Ampofo. Let's go for a breather. We will be back shortly. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Ghana. I'm in the studio. He's joined me. Is Obed Owusu Adai. He's spokesperson for environmental NGOs against the sale of Achimota forest, and he's with me. Good afternoon. You're welcome. You're welcome. I earlier on spoke with Daryl. You know Daryl, right? For Arocha Ghana. We will play his voice soon. But I said earlier that it has to do with Achimota forest. We seem to be having a lot of civil society organizations speaking about it, and that's what I like, because we cannot always leave it for the politicians. This is so much of a national interest because it has to do with your life, my life. If you think it's Achimota forest and so what, when you start feeling the pinch, you know that it is never and so what. So let's see how the NGOs are also going to drive us towards maybe to a good destination. Thank you for the battle anyway, for even starting in the first place. But how many organizations have you captured under these NGOs against the sale of Achimota forest?
Currently, we have about 13 NGOs, but some of them are platforms. So Forest Watch Ghana is a platform of several NGOs, about 45 NGOs, so they're also part of this. So if you want to break it down into specific individual NGOs, you are running into around 50, 60, and not just national level NGOs. We also have community-based organizations that are not in Accra, but they are at the community level. They are all members of these platforms. So in totality, you could say we're having over 50 CBOs, NGOs, and CSOs across the country who are signatories to these petitions that we have submitted.
So we're likely to be counting over 50, 60, 70
NGOs, and CBOs.
If there are some that are already platforms with 30, 40, then you should be getting into the hundreds.
So I've added those platforms. So Forest Watch, they are about 45.
Right.
And when you add the 45 to these 13 that have signed up, then you're running into probably around 50 or so NGOs that have signed up. And that is from the environmental NGOs only, but we're also aware that pressure groups like Occupy Ghana and others are also making their own moves. And so I think I'm excited. And I had these conversations with one MP, and I was telling him that we are excited not just for the fact that a lot of people are getting interested in the conversation, but in times past, for example, when the Atiwa case came, a few organizations spoke against it.
Got interested.
Yes, and it just died off. It took about 8 of us to take it to court. It's still in court. Yesterday we went to court over the issue.
What's the state of the issue? I'm very much interested as well.
Yes.
When Achimota Forest came up, I thought, and not to, denigrate any particular government or anything, but I thought that I can't understand why Ghana would do this to ourselves.
You're right.
It's ours.
Yeah, it's a shame,
take me out as a journalist. I'm not a journalist right now. It's ours. It's a natural resource.
Exactly.
And it's benefiting us.
Yeah.
Why would we do this to us? Because Etiwa was on my mind so much when Achimota came up.
It should be. It should be on the minds of every Ghanaian, because unlike Achimota Forest that was planted, Atiwa is a natural forest. It has some biodiversity that doesn't exist anywhere else except in the Atiwa. Certain species of butterflies, certain species of frogs and others exist in the Atiwa that you cannot find anywhere. So it baffles me as an environmental NGO or activist to find out that the government is willing to sacrifice all that biodiversity for some few ounces of bauxite. And it only shows how we don't value our natural resources. And it's not just starting with Atiwa. It's way back since 1920s when we started reservation. There have been conscious efforts by certain elements within the powers that be, within the corridors of power, to maybe not deliberately, but through their actions or inactions, degraded a lot of our forest reserves. And I can give you numbers. I know people like numbers and statistics. Somewhere in the 1990s, we had almost like 8.2 million hectares of forest. Right now, we have just about 1.6 million. We have lost over 90%
Wait,
of
can
our
you go
forest.
over that figure again? We had what?
We had about 8.2 million hectares.
8.2.
Yes, it's a few decades ago. But now we have intact forests, just about 1.6 million. 1.6 million. So from 8.2 to 1.6 million. You can do the math. So
between how many years?
And that is when we started reservation, and maybe we can go into a bit of history, because the white man, and I believe in being a sovereign country, and that being independent is very important. But when the British were here, they realized the importance of certain corridor of forest across the country. And today, anybody who has studied natural resources, agriculture, can attest to the fact that all the places that we are getting a lot of cocoa, a lot of oil palm, a lot of all those agro commodities are along the areas that we reserved forest in the 1920s. So all the way up to 1960s, we did a lot of reservation. And just as has come to the news, Achimota Forest was reserved in 1927. So between that time to 1960, there were a lot of forests. 282 forest and wildlife reserves were put aside by our colonial masters.
I have a smile on my face.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's exciting just to know that we had a committed leadership that back in 1920s, they planned for us.
Exactly.
And planted trees.
Yes, it's actually reserved. We had the trees already.
We had the trees already, but it was reserved.
Reserved. That this land area is reserved as a forest reserve. So they promulgated a law, the Forest Act of 1927, the CAP 157, which has become very popular because it was referenced. And through that process, they did reservation. And so there were two forms of reservation. It's important that we understand, because the Achimota Forest has brought up these issues. The first form of reservation was that the state identified an area, a forest. It could belong to a family, a stool land, and then it's either the state compensated, full compensation to the family or the stool land owner, and took it outright as belonging to the state, to be managed for the state. Or two, when we identified those areas, we said, okay, we want to manage, the state wants to manage those forests for the landowners. And so they were not paid compensation. So they had rights to the forest. They can enter into the forest and take non-timber forest products. So I mean, I like fufu very much. I'm an Ashanti, you know, we like fufu. So all the mortar and the pistols that we use, they are given permits to go and get these things from the forest because it's not a fully protected forest that compensations were paid. So in the Achimota conversation, those two scenarios exist. In 1921, I mean, I think the records are there that compensations were paid. So that fall within the first category where compensations are paid. And I can count over 16, 17 of such reserves. The Mole National Park, the Kalapa, the Ankasa, Bia, Bui, all those national parks and wildlife and protected areas were paid for by the state, so the landowners don't have any rights to it again. Fast forward to other forest reserves across the country, the Atiwa, just to mention the most popular one, and then you go to the western region, there are a lot of them, there's the Sui, Suhuma Forest Reserve and all those reserves. They were taken from the landowners, compensations were not paid, so every quarter, every 3 months, when harvesting is done, timber is harvested, these landowners are paid royalties.
Right.
Yeah, so those are the issues. But just to come back to the point you made that our interest in our colonial masters saw the need to reserve these forests, not just because they wanted to reserve forests, but they saw the ecological and the ecosystem functions that it can provide. And so right now, the number one region producing cocoa is the northwestern region. And that is where we also have a lot of forests right now. In times past, just about 30 years ago, Bunahafo and Ashanti were leading in cocoa production. But over the past 30 years, we've lost a lot of forests in the Ashanti and Brahafo region. So cocoa production and other food crop production has gone down. So people need to realize the importance of having forests. Aside the ecological functions they play, they also ensure that there is a good microclimate for crops, our food crops and other things to do well. So yes, I'm happy that I saw that interesting phase. It shows the foresight of our past leaders, not our current leaders.
Because that's the attack on the current leaders now, that you seem to have no vision.
Exactly.
For even the next 10 years of generation that we're going to have in the country. So Achimota was reserved.
Yes.
And then we compensated families. The old family says the 1921 that was
1921, the first one.
21, yes, that was acquired.
Yeah.
We were compensated.
Yeah, they were compensated £4,000.
Yes. But the
1927.
27, the subsequent one.
They are claiming that they were not compensated.
Okay, you say they are claiming.
Yes, because the Honorable Minister, former Minister, Honorable Inusa Foseini, who was a sector minister in 2013, did indicate that as far as he is concerned, when he was in power, he had no reason to believe that they were not compensated. And
so you explained that some of the difference of compensations, some are paid off.
Yes.
Some you're not paid off, but every
year you are entitled to revenues, royalties that come from the forest. Yeah.
So some families agree that is how we want it, and then they benefit continuously.
Yes.
But at Achimota Forest, we don't find it in the category of paying royalties to any family, do we?
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's because no economic activities are happening in there. So you go across the country, there are forest reserves like Achimota Forest, where harvesting, people are cutting trees in them, they are logging, and they are paying huge sums of money to government, and government pays a percentage of that to the landowners. Unfortunately, for the old family, the Achimota Forest, the purpose for which it was set up as a forest reserve was not to produce economic benefits, but to be set up as a buffer first, and also to produce firewood to feed the Achimota school canteen. And so there were not a lot, I can't recall an instance where economic activities have happened there that would generate revenue for them to also have a percentage. So yes, on that score, that is why I agreed in some principle with the point that Honorable Yusuf Husseini made on a platform, that when these issues came to him, when he was a minister, he realized that on compassionate grounds, it's very, very important that we recognize that on compassionate grounds, they did agree that they will give portions of it to the old family. Where we have a problem as an environmental NGOs is that the government had two options. You either compensate them or you give them a portion of the
We don't know anything about compassion.
So why would you choose to rather cede off some portions of the forest reserve instead of finding the money to pay them a compensation? Because that would have been the most ideal situation.
So, on compassionate grounds, can raise concerns in subsequent decades to come for them to come and tell you again, oh, we were not compensated.
Exactly. And my sister, that is where our fears are. Because we've issued the first statement, and in the first statement, we raised that point, the point that there are over 282 forest reserves, and about 260 of them are in the same category as the second acquisition of Achimota forest, where compensations were not paid to the landowners. Mm-hmm. Imagine if all the landowners across the country, across all these over 260 forest reserves, also came up and said, you took our land over 100 years ago, and on compassionate grounds, we are petitioning that give us portions of it for our cocoa farms. What would happen? Because if you've done it for the old family, there will not be, you cannot give us any reason why you will not do that for the other families.
So, referring to Yusuf Husseini's comment of compassionate grounds,
yeah,
they have set a bad precedent already.
Exactly.
So you have started it, mm-hmm. and you don't have a moral right to accuse the current administration for degazetting parts of the land it calls peripherals.
Yeah, that's a tricky argument to make, and I always make this point when I go on programs that we are environmental NGOs. We try not to get involved in the politics of the issues. But
no, this is not the politics of it. I'm really looking at this with a very objective, you know.
No, I agree,
yes,
but you would need to go back.
I wish that all the NGOs that are picking up this issue will not just focus, Sir John's will is out, mm-hmm. and so on. That's not what the problem is. Something has triggered this chain of reactions and actions being taken by politicians. Mm-hmm. And so we have to look at it as a whole. Mm-hmm. So what you started, something was acquired 1920s, coming down to us. Mm. So government after government, how have they managed the situation till now? Okay. The holistic approach of looking at it is what we have to concentrate on.
That is true.
So that's why I refer to Yusuf Husseini. There's no need referring there's a government in place now. Mm. But I need to refer to it because I want to point out to you that you also did something wrong. On compassionate ground, what's that?
Actually, the truth is, it didn't start with Yusuf Husseini's time. It started in 2007.
Right.
So the first petitioning on record, as we know, was sent to President Kufuor in 2007. And on the same basis of compassionate grounds. So at that time, they said humanitarian grounds. Of course, they are playing with those words. And on that basis, and President Kufuor at that time, the committee that was set up recommended 90 or so acres to be released to the family on compassionate or humanitarian grounds for that purpose. And then fast forward, but you see the main problem. Let's do the fast forward. Fast forward to 2013, and there was a change of government. A new government comes and they repetition, and then the new government also sets up a committee, the Afaridate committee, which also comes up with a recommendation that, the previous government did say that we should give them 90 acres, but when we looked at it, we think they should be given more. Isn't it funny? They thought they should be given more. They should be given about 193 acres.
Acres, you mean the current?
No, that in 2013.
2013, okay.
Yes, in 2013. So that was the recommendation that the Afaridate committee made to at that time, I think it was Honorable Mike Hammer, who was the minister at that time.
So there's also the suspicion that every time a family makes a petition, it's actually a point of excitement for politicians because that's when they get to do the additions or subtractions and, have their kickbacks.
Exactly our fear. And that is why we are where we are now. And that is why we have written our last petition to CHRAJ for CHRAJ to come into it. There are a lot of press releases, press statements that have been issued by ministers, by the family, by Occupy Ghana, by several other interested parties. And we think it's about time that we got all this information on the table, get a respectable institution to do the due diligence, investigate into it, and then establish the merits or otherwise, and establish if there were culpabilities, people were compromised or whatever that happened from 2007 all the way to now, where the degazetting is happening. For me, as a technical forester, what makes it more a bit, I don't want to use annoying, but a bit difficult for me to understand is that the previous government did executive directive. They gave executive directive. They signed MOUs. Unfortunately for the old family, irrespective of how many MOUs you get from government, irrespective of how many executive directives that you get from the president, until the forest reserve has been degazetted, you cannot take whatever is given to you to the Lands Commission for title. Yes, and that is why for us, the degazetting right now opens the floodgates. So,
yes, but the Lands Ministry has come out to say that we don't have any records on, for example, Sir John's.
Yes,
They
cannot have records.
So that even curtails Sir John's will.
Exactly.
To a certain point that your will is there, but when it comes to those land properties, you don't own them.
Exactly.
And that the political powers can settle that.
Exactly. But as soon as it is degazetted, as soon as the so-called peripheral of the forest reserve is degazetted, then whoever bought some from the family way back in 2007, 2013 or now can then go to the Lands Commission and have a title to those pieces of land. So all those who are encroaching, who claim they bought it from the old family or got it from any of those families, they cannot have a title to those lands until this degazetting was done.
Do you know what I'm thinking?
No.
All these land guards problems, we are creating
we
it
are creating
ourselves.
it, yes. Exactly.
Because the complicated nature of even this, if I'm getting it, I'm buying it from the old family. Or the old family gets it, they sublet it to me, and I think I own a land. And then the Lands Commission comes in and says, I'm sorry, this land cannot be yours because it's still under gazette.
Exactly. Yeah, so the old family will give you an indenture. I mean, if you've ever bought a land, you realize that they'll go and get a surveyor who will give you the plan, and then they'll give you an indenture signed by the family, signed by all that. But that indenture is only an indenture. It's not a title. You can only get a title when you have gone to the courts and then you have gone to the Lands Commission for a search to be conducted for them to establish that whoever gave you that indenture has the right, is the rightful owner, and then they can give you a title. So that is exactly what has been happening since 2007 till now. People are holding indentures, people are holding certain documents that they got a land from probably the old family, but they could never have gotten a title to those land until the degazetting was done. Once the degazetting is done, then they can have access to it, to the title.
Let's go onto the phone line. Is it he's on Zoom, right? Okay, so we've been joined via Zoom by Alhassan Suhini, he's Member of Parliament for Tamale North Constituency, and it's on this issue. But I'll come back to you.
Sure.
Suhini, you're welcome. Good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time on Good Afternoon Ghana. So we've already, I think we've gone quite a distance on this matter. Currently, what we're expecting from the ministry is to set up the committee to investigate. The minority, you are also calling for, a public hearing on this investigation and not an in-camera type of committee. What else should we be expecting should the ministry decides that we'll do what we want to do and not necessarily open it to the public?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to join your viewers directly. Permit me to set a few issues straight and also raise some issues for which reason we are demanding a public commission of inquiry into this matter. First of all, since yesterday, there have been an attempt to change the narrative, to suggest that it was the NDC government that opened the Pandora's box and started this whole debacle over the Achimota forest. Even though clearly the ministry in all its releases have, clearly indicated that this whole transaction began under President Kufuor. It beats my imagination why all of a sudden questions are being asked of the NDC suggesting that they started with them, so why are they now complaining? Clearly, that has to be set right. The current government, even in their own releases, have admitted that this whole, approach to dealing with the Achimota forest started under President Kufuor in 2007, 2008. Again, there has been the question of whether or not the Achimota forest has been sold, and whether initial story that came out about the sale of the Achimota forest, was fair and correct. The ministry held an evening press conference to assure everybody that whatever government was doing was rather seeking to protect the Achimota forest. I mean, fast forward, the events that have happened, the facts that have been adduced, doesn't support the minister's claim. It is clear to anybody who does not want to be, everybody who doesn't want to bury the facts, that indeed attempts have been made and some sales and purchases have taken place. Otherwise, why would anybody have the courage to bequeath it to a nephew in his will if some purchases, some transactions have not taken place? So clearly, that also needs to be established through a commission of inquiry. Apart from the fact that we need to also establish how this whole began, we also need to establish whether or not the initial story was correct. And I believe it was correct because even before Mr. John Will was, confirmed by the ministry through his press statement yesterday, I was of the view that whatever the situation was, the family, the Owu family, was not going to maintain the 361 acres that was allocated to them as a forest reserve. They were obviously going to sell it. And so whether a direct sale from government or a negotiated backdoor sale through a family known as the Owu family, it was still going to amount to a sale. Again, we have come to the realization that the EI 144 was actually based on a wrong law, a law that has been long repealed. And so whatever directive has been given by the president based on EI 144 can be considered null and void because EI 144, yes, EI 144 was premised on Cap 157 of the Forestry Act. And that was repealed by the Land Use and Spatial Planning Act.
Just a quick correction. Obed is shaking his head to something.
You require parliamentary.
Hello, Sweeney. Yes, Obed is shaking his head to the fact that you're saying that the Cap 157 was repealed. What intervention do you want to make?
No, so the Cap 157 has not been repealed. Certain sections have been repealed, but the section that sets up a forest reserve that gives the president the authority to digazette, that is still intact. That has not been repealed by the special planning law. Okay,
so can the 144 still sits on that section that is not being reviewed on the Cap 157?
Yes, from our records and from our reading of the law, that section is still valid. The Cap 157, the Forestry Act of 1927, those portions that set up forest reserve, that also mandates the president to be able to do degazetting, is still valid in our laws.
It can be used.
It can be used, yes.
Okay, so that's the intervention Obed is making. Obed is the spokesperson for the environmental NGOs against sale of Achimota forest, and with him in the studio. You can come in and continue.
Well, clearly, I will not like to litigate this matter, except to just say that the, disagreement over whether or not the law has been repealed, as just demonstrated by Obed, is one of the reasons why we are calling for a commission of inquiry, so that with the powers of a high court, it can settle all of these gray areas. You already have the issue of whether it's been sold or it's not being sold. Yeah. I've also, raised the issue of whether the NDC started it or not. So the EI 144, we are of the belief that it's premised on a wrong law. So it's another reason, if Obed disagrees with me, why we think that a commission of inquiry must be established as a matter of urgency to settle this very important public interest matter. I believe I'm correctly advised by our lawyers that.
Okay, we're having an interaction with Al Hassan Suhain, a member of parliament for Tamale North constituency, and he's telling us more on what the minority's position still stands. They believe that the premise of the 144 on the CAP 157 is wrong law, and so, well, we will be dealing with that. So, I think you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Continue, please.
Yes, so I'm saying that we are correctly advised, and we believe the advice is the position of the law that Land Use and Special Planning Act repealed Section 19 of CAP 157. If Obed disagrees, I will not, stretch the argument beyond saying that the disagreement is the reason why we need a commission of inquiry to look into this matter and establish which position is correct. Again, there's the issue of whether or not is the periphery that was granted to the family.
Right.
I have held from day one that 361 acres of about 880 acres. The ministry now says it's about 1,000 acres. Whether it's 889 or it's about 1,000 acres, 361 of that figure cannot be said to be periphery. 361 is about 40% of the entire, forest as it stands. And so it cannot be said to be the periphery. And so the Commission of Inquiry will perhaps also advise all of us what is acceptable as periphery after, they go into this matter. There's also the question of how much was allocated by President Kufuor. In the beginning of this whole conversation, we had 90 acres. We are being told by, other sources, including the former Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Honorable Idrissa Forsedi, that indeed President Kufuor allocated more than 93. It was actually in his narration about 190 plus, which the NDC reduced to 114, some say 118. The ministry in its release yesterday sought to suggest that after the 118 was approved by cabinet and agreed on and settled with the family, there were some variations that also took it to about 243 or so, and now it is 361. We need to get the truth about these figures and also the reasons why they keep varying. We need to establish that. We cannot just leave it to he says, she says, and they say, and they counter. We need a commission of inquiry to get all the facts about these acres that were supposed to have been used to settle the family. We in the NDC believe that the 2014 indenture that was awarded the family settled the matter. And so the Commission of Inquiry, again, will look into how it was resurrected after the April 2014 indenture, and to a point that the acres had to vary upwards to about 361 because a petition was sent to President Kufuor. President Kufuor, dealt with it by awarding a certain number of acres. The President Mill suspended it, but the family kept fighting and suggesting that they were unfairly treated. By 2012, 2013, a committee was set up to look into their case. Their case was determined to be, worthy of government's intervention. Mm-hmm. And like we are told, on humanitarian grounds, they were settled. They agreed to 118 or 114 acres. So when and how, was the matter resurrected to warrant an increase in the acreage again? The Commission of Inquiry, we believe, will settle that as well for all of us. So these and other reasons, this is the reason why we call on all Ghanaians to support our call and to put pressure on the President to establish this Commission of Inquiry as soon as possible for us to find out what has gone wrong in the past and recommend ways to protect the Achimota forest. Because after all is said and done, our focus must be on how to preserve the Achimota forest.
So, Sohini, I'm glad you mentioned the humanitarian ground intervention, because we've had by history, government after government, during Kufuor's time, lands were given to them on humanitarian grounds. During Mahama's time, lands were given to them on compassionate grounds. I don't know how these grounds were documented that today we can use it as a legal defense, as a state.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes, that's a fair point to make. I have said that personally. I think that the first mistake happened under President Kufuor, who entertained the request of the petitioners. I don't think that President Kufuor should have entertained that petition at all, because it serves as a dangerous precedent. And I think I did hear Obed repeat the point I've made severally, that almost all the forest reserves that we have, in this country are sitting on lands that have not been compensated for. So when you return part of the Achimota forest to its, owners in the manner that President Kufuor did, you only may be opening a Pandora's box and, encouraging other landowners across the country where forest reserves sit to begin to also demand portions of that land for whatever, purpose that they want to use it for. So I believe the first mistake happened under President Kufuor. The petition of the O family should not have been entertained in the first place. Now, you understand how governance is continuing, and sometimes a number of considerations are made. I do not know on which grounds, but I can hazard a guess that the NDC in their 2012 manifesto decided that they were going to turn the forest into an eco park to preserve it and to maximize its utility, or its utilization. Mm-hmm. Now, on that basis, if the family came up, suggesting that the government that gave it some acres was acting, in bad faith, because government is continuum. So whether it was an NPP government that gave it under President Kufuor, right, or it was an NDC government that was suspending it, if they raised the issue of acting in bad faith, mm-hmm, it was going to be binding and it was going to be taken seriously, because you can't give and take at the same time without any reasonable justification. So if the family at the time started raising the question that, look, you are turning the place that was given us into an eco park, you give it to us and you are taking it, you are using an eco. I mean, we need to also be compensated somewhat. I believe that maybe it saw the government of the day at the time saw sense in being considerate, with the request and granting it. That is not entirely excusable, I must admit. But right, I mean, if you understand the intricacies that go into governance, you are forgiven to pardon, the decision. I mean, the issue that they were confronted with. I mean, the family were raising genuine concerns that you are acting in bad faith. You gave us land and you are taking it back. And you gave us land does not mean the NDC government did it, but a government did it, and it was the Ghanaian government that did it. So it was perhaps what informed the decision at the time to, on compassionate grounds, like we are being told by Yunus Afiseni, grant them a reduced, number of acres, so that the Eco Park project could go on without any threats from the indigenous people who claimed the land was theirs. I am saying that, left to me alone, petition in the first place shouldn't have even been entertained in 2008. But fast forward, if it was entertained and a lot of water going down the drain led to the NDC also negotiating with the family and reducing it, I can live with that. What I can't live with is government degazetting the whole forest and using an executive instrument to reclassify the area into a non-forest reserve, because when it remains a forest reserve, I mean, there's still some expectation that whatever development is carried out there will be eco-compatible and will have minimal impact on the integrity of the forest. But when you reclassify it and declare it non-forest reserve, what you are simply saying is that all kinds of development, all manner of development, say factories, that will have, disastrous consequences on the integrity of the forest can be put up there. Shopping malls and all the like can be put up there. So I am unable to live with, the situation where you have government reclassifying the place as a non-forest reserve. I am also unable to live with a situation where it seems to me that the disagreement between the government of Ghana and the Owo family was settled in 2014 with a number of acreage. I do not want to solely stick to the 114 or 118, but at least it was settled. The family agreed to settlement and registered the number of acres that they were given with the Lands Commission. So at what point did the whole matter resurrect again for it to be increased to 361? I am unable to live with that. And I believe that a commission of inquiry in the nature of Article 278 of the 1992 Constitution is what can settle this issue once and for all and give recommendations that will be binding on all with regard to how to protect the Achimota forest, the only green belt left in the CT7 as a carbon sink moving forward.
Right. Al-Hassan Sehuni, Member of Parliament for Tamale North Constituency, thank you for spending some time with us. Let's go for a breather. When we come back, Obed is itching to respond to some of the issues. I'll allow you to wrap up. We'll be back shortly. All right, you're welcome back to Good Afternoon, Ghana. I'm still in the studio with Obed, who is representing the NGOs that are against the sale of Achimota. We're wrapping up, so just a quick one response to what I know you giggled. I actually giggled in my head.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that, like I was telling you during the break, this is not the first time I'm engaging with Honorable, and most of the time I do agree with the points that he made. And I think on this platform, to most of the things he said are true, they are factual, they are verifiable. The only portion that probably are not very factual is the fact that it's not the whole reserve that is being degazetted and reclassified. As the portion, the so-called 361 acres that is being degazetted.
Yes, yeah. He made that, but I didn't want to interject
sure.
Because.
No, but the point I want to make before I come to our petition to CHRAJ is that great. It's good that for us as civil society, we will support that inquiry that the minority is calling for, which will be a holistic inquiry. So it should not be only looking at the 2022 incident, but probably go back to 2007, all the way to 2013, 12, all the instances or all the things that happened for us to get to where we are, to have a more holistic picture that we will welcome. But whilst we are doing that, and for us as civil society organizations, we also see an element that is coming up indicating that certain government officials probably have been compromised. And when it comes to them having portions of the forest reserve and being able to will it to their families and their nephews and all that. So what we have done, being citizens and not spectators, as we were told by the president, is to petition CHRAJ, the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, that there are issues pertaining to this Achimota forest that is beyond the commission of inquiry, that is of almost criminal in nature, and so we are petitioning them to take a look at it and see how they will be able to resolve those issues, and anybody who is found to have committed themselves or might have done something that is against the law, then the law should take its
Okay,
due
we're
course.
wrapping up. He raised the issue of the peripherals.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that
It's also
matter
been
up.
on my mind. I'm like, which part of the
My
forest?
sister, there is no, I mean, that term, I don't even know where it came from. I'm a forester, and I've been on the field for several years. The issue is every forest reserve, the boundaries of the forest reserve is in law. It's in law. So the schedule that is attached is in law. There is nothing like a peripheral to a forest reserve.
So it doesn't even matter if squatters are sleeping there.
No, it's not a peripheral. If all the encroached areas of forest reserves are deemed to be peripheral, then you go to the western region, we wouldn't have a forest because there have been a lot of encroachment in forest reserves for cocoa plantation and all that, but we still term those lands as forest reserves. So please, I mean, for our own education, there is nothing like a peripheral to a forest reserve. The land, all the land within the forest reserve, the Achimota Forest Reserve, that is the reserve. Wherever somebody has encroached, and that is a failure on the part of the Forestry Commission to play their protective role. They are mandated by law to protect. The Act 571 that sets up the Forestry Commission gives it clear roles to play, development, protection, and all that. And if they fail to do that, they cannot use that to justify and say, as an excuse.
So you deliberately watch over a forest reserve boundary to be encroached upon.
And then you call it a peripheral.
You decide to give it a name and call it peripheral.
It doesn't work like that.
And sell it.
It doesn't work like that. It's unfortunate that it has become a term that is frequently used by the politicians. I've heard the minister use it several times, even on this platform.
Is it the politician that brought that word into the forests?
No, I mean in forest, and I'm a forester.
In forestry,
I'm a forester. There's no word in forestry called peripheral. Peripheral of what? There's nothing like that. It's a forest reserve. It's either a forest reserve or it's not a forest reserve. We only have two areas, so forest reserve and off reserve. So you cannot have a peripheral to a forest reserve. Where does that come from? It doesn't exist in our terminologies. And maybe for avoidance of doubt, you can reach out to the Forestry Commission technical people, and if they are willing to speak, they could explain. But I, as a forester, I can tell you that there is nothing like a peripheral to a forest reserve. It's the encroached areas, but it's still a forest reserve. And you cannot use a term that is alien to forestry to want to give that a place as a declassified area. So, but the point we are making as we wrap up is that we welcome the call by the minority that there should be a comprehensive committee of inquiry, public inquiry, to look into it, where people who were involved in it, they are still alive. Mr. Faridate is still alive. Mr. Enusa Husseini, they are still there. All those who were involved in decisions along the timelines can come and give testimonies, and we can document it. Whilst we are doing that, we are also of the opinion that certain government officials that currently, in the past, or whoever, from what is happening, example, the Sir John Well and all that, is pointing to a certain picture that possibly there have been compromises made along the way. That is why it keeps jumping. The volume of increment keep going up and up. I've read the minister's justification where he's trying to justify that certain portions that the family wanted were denied them, and so when you are giving them portions that is less lucrative, you increase the volume,
the
acreage. I mean, it does. I mean, that what kind of justification is that? so that, I mean, I didn't want to get into that, but that is what we've been invited to interrogate, and we think CHRAJ by constitution, by the laws of the state, is clothed with certain responsibilities to investigate into some of these incidences of possible actions or inactions of government officials that might have compromised the Achimota forest. So we are calling on them, and we have petitioned them to look into it. We submitted just just 2 points that we want them to investigate. One, establish between 2007 and 2022 all the administrative decisions that were made. Were there decisions that were compromised or were not made in good faith? They should establish that. Then, two, anybody, they should establish through the Lands Commission any government official who might or might have not been involved in getting portions of the forest, or, in this case, people willing it to their children. We should establish them and take it from them, and that is what we are petitioning the CHRAJ about.
We'll end it here.
Sure.
You know, sometimes when you go to the market and you're buying tomatoes, and you get the bigger ones, they give you maybe 2, you see 5 cedis, 2 balls of tomatoes. Somebody came to demonstrate here. But if they give you smaller or very tiny ones, they might give you 4.
4 or 5, yeah.
And say, that is the application the minister is applying.
No, it doesn't work like
to
that
the land.
in forestry.
So, Obade Usodai is a spokesperson for environmental NGOs against the sale of Achimota Forest. He spent some time with us in the studio. Al-Hassan S. Sohini is Member of Parliament for Tamale North Constituency and a member of the minority, of course, also raising concerns and calling for a public inquiry into the issue. This all time will allow us on Good Afternoon Ghana. I am Ania Fompofu. Thank you for your time.